I never really could understand how someone was able to overpay for a mediocre meal from a certain chain restaurant in the United States. Fortunately, after today, I don't think you'll ever have to step foot in an Olive Garden again. Now we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. We're going to use equal parts all-purpose flour and semolina flour. We're going to mix that up as nicely as we possibly can and try to make a little well in the middle. That way we can crack 2 large or medium eggs, depending on whatever you have, right in the middle. We're going to start whisking that together so that it can get a little bit of an emulsion going. I almost forgot, but make sure to always add a little bit of salt and some olive oil into your dough mix. Now at a certain point, it's actually going to become hard to mix together. This is where you're going to actually start to knead your dough. Now this is very important. Do not cry. Whatever you do, don't cry. I understand it's very sticky, but at some point it's going to start to come together. Now watch, I lift it on one side and then push down and then use the other hand to repeat the process until you get a nice little rhythm, something that's smooth and nice and supple. Now something that bounces back because of gluten development. And you're actually going to want to knead your dough for about 10 minutes, after which you're going to wrap it in saran wrap or plastic wrap, whatever you have, and let it rest for 30 minutes so the gluten strands can begin to relax. After the 30 minutes has elapsed, you're going to want to flour your work surface. That way you can begin to work with your dough. And I recommend cutting your dough before you begin to roll it out. It'll probably save you a lot of time. Now we're going to do something that's called laminating, which basically means you roll out your dough thin and then you fold it over itself until it forms either a rectangle or a square, and you'll probably want to repeat this process at least 3 times. Once you finish laminating your dough, you're going to want to roll it as thin as you possibly can get it. I'm talking, I want you to be able to see it through your hand. After you finish with some cosmetic cleanup, you're going to fold the dough over onto itself, and this is what's important right now. You're going to want to saw, not push down, but saw through your dough. Otherwise you risk pinching your dough and getting something that sticks together. It's bad news bears, so just try to avoid that. Separating your pasta, you're going to want to dust it with flour and toss it to make sure nothing sticks together, and then we're going to actually let it hang and air dry while we move on to the next portion. Now if you've never minced garlic before, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to crush and peel, and then we're going to chop as fine as we possibly can, at which point we're also going to add a pinch of salt, and then we're going to macerate it with the side of our blade. Once you're finished mincing your garlic, the lineup is pretty simple. All it is of course garlic, but also salt, black pepper, butter, and the pasta. Now, listen to me very carefully. Do not add olive oil to your pasta water. You're only going to add salt. Yes, it keeps it from sticking. I've heard that before. But you know what else keeps it from sticking? Stirring it immediately after you add it to the water. If you add olive oil, it will keep your pasta from emulsifying in whatever sauce you're putting it in, which is the saddest thing ever. Don't add olive oil, please. When your pasta is almost but not quite done cooking, this is when you're going to add your butter and you're going to fry your garlic in there. That way, when everything is complete, you're going to be able to throw in your pasta with a little bit of pasta water and toss it together for something absolutely delicious. Once you finish topping it with both black pepper and Parmesan, go ahead and dig in. Yoink! Now the next thing we're going to do is make a super simple spaghetti recipe. You already know the drill. Laminate 3 times, roll it out super duper thin, cut it into its appropriate size, toss it with a little bit of flour, and then let it air dry while we move on to the next portion of the recipe. For our sauce, we're going to use a 28-ounce can of tomatoes. Don't use fire roasted like I used here. It gives it a weird bitter aftertaste, as I would find out later. Now same here, you're going to want to crush the garlic and chop it, but roughly chop it. We're not going to mince it like the other recipes I've called for. You're also going to take 1 large white onion and then just roughly chop it. We're not looking for anything fancy here. And feel free to get some fresh basil as well for your sauce. Now will be everything we need, as well as the addition of black pepper. For assembly, you'll need a large heavy pot with a little bit of olive oil on the bottom. Let that come up to temperature, and then at that point you'll be able to fry your garlic until it becomes fragrant. By the way, don't burn your garlic. And this temperature is roughly medium-high. At this point, we're also going to want to add our onion and saute it. We're going to just try to cook it down as much as we possibly can. I almost forgot it. Don't forget it with yours, but make sure to add some black pepper and then cook it down until it becomes translucent. Once the onions are translucent, make sure to add your can of crushed tomatoes or pureed or whatever you have on hand, and make sure to fill it with some water. You might have to add water continuously throughout the cooking process. Just keep an eye on it. Go ahead and tuck in your sprig of basil and let this go for at least 1 hour, checking it periodically on medium-low heat. Once you finish cooking your red sauce, go ahead and fish out the basil. It's done its job. I'm actually going to puree it so we get a really smooth consistency. Again, same procedure. Cook until mostly done. Then we're going to dump off most of the water, but not all of it. Reserve some of that pasta water. We're going to bring it back, dump in a little knob of butter, mix that into the sauce, and then we're going to also add some of our red pureed tomato sauce, and then begin to emulsify our beautiful spaghetti. I probably could have reduced the sauce a little bit, but we're still going to top it off with some fresh Parmesan and enjoy this midweek staple. Our third and final dish will probably be the most challenging, as it will be ravioli. We're going to start off by mincing some fresh garlic. The next thing we're going to do is dice up a bunch of mushrooms. I'm using a blend here of portobellos and oyster mushrooms. They are a little bit more pricey, so use whatever you got, but I will tell you they are very delicious. Once finished dicing the mushrooms, I'm actually going to add a few pinches of salt to help draw out some of that moisture, and I'm going to add black pepper for some inexplicable reason. Now we're going to take a large pan and put it on high heat to cook down the mushrooms. In this method, I'm going to borrow from America's Test Kitchen. First, you add water to completely cook the mushrooms, and then you add your fat, which prevents you from using way too much fat because mushrooms love to absorb fat. Don't forget to add a little bit of garlic. We're going to add a little bit of nuance to this as well. Once finished cooking, we're going to remove them from the heat and move them to this bowl, where we're then going to add some ricotta. Now, this container was about 15 ounces, so just keep that in mind. We're then going to mix it for some inexplicable reason before realizing that we had to add some zest and lemon juice to our mixture. It's the same dance. We're going to laminate 3 times, we're going to roll out super thin, and we're going to cosmetically clean up. Now, I actually left 2 inches of space per ravioli. This is just what I found what worked for me. And we're going to portion it out think less than what you would normally imagine. That's probably how the best way I could describe that for you when you portion out your raviolis. When finished, you're going to want to take your finger and wet it and then brush it on the edges of your raviolis, thus sealing them in their packages of pasta. Nothing is worse than having a piece of ravioli explode in its pasta water. You're going to mess up. It happens, and that's okay. That's what makes making pasta fun. You get to do it over and over again until you get it right. But it's going to happen. Sometimes you're just going to screw it up, and ravioli in particular, yeah, sometimes it just happens to the best of us too. I feel like we've done this for 1,000 lifetimes now. Heavily salt your pasta water. Add your pasta. Cook it until it's mostly done. Then, in a hot pan, add some butter. Let it melt. Then we're going to include our aromatics, in which case I'm going to use some garlic and a little bit of some fresh sage. We're going to fry that all up together to help everything incorporate and marry together. Add some freshly ground black pepper. Then we're going to add our almost cooked ravioli into the mixture. A little bit of pasta water. We're going to toss to incorporate. And well, yeah, you got one of the most beautiful dishes that I've made. Honestly, this is probably the prettiest dish that I've made so far on the show, and in general. I mean, just look at that. That is absolutely breathtaking. Now, the cross section isn't too pretty, but I can tell you for sure the way it tastes is absolutely divine.